Welcome back. In a moment, we'll examine some of the latest financial technology on offer. But first, here are some other stories to keep an eye on. 4 million people in Chile have been left without drinking water after rainstorms and landslides contaminated a major river. Authorities were forced to cut off the water supply in Santiago and order restaurants and businesses to close following the heavy rainfall runoff from the Maipo River. The government of the Pacific island of Kiribati has rejected a Russian businessman's plan to build a multi-million-dollar tourist resort on the island chain. Former Russian MP Anton Bakhov had offered a $350 million investment in exchange for sovereign rights over 3 of the nation's uninhabited islands. And more than 3,500 attacks were carried out against refugees and migrants in Germany last year. The country's interior minister said police statistics show the violence amounts to about 10 anti-migrant attacks each day. 43 of those injured in the attacks were children. Now, online passwords, we all have more and more of them, and many of us aren't great at having good ones. Some of us use the same one for everything. Others use things that are too obvious, like family names, the name of a pet, or dates of birth. It means we're often easy pickings for digital criminals, and that is turning Fintech, or financial technology, into big business. The new buzzword in the industry is biometrics, using things like retina or iris scans and fingerprints to get access to your cash. Insight's Chloe Kalpan has been unlocking its secrets.
Passwords are great when we can remember them and when they're not being hacked. Experts say the time has come for a more sophisticated way to log in and make secure bank transactions. But a biometric login using our human characteristics, it sounds like something from a film.
Author PPKS 9mm short. It's been coded to your palm print so only you can fire it. Less of a random killing machine, more of a personal statement.
But biometrics isn't just stuff dreamed up for award-winning movies anymore. Using your fingerprint, eyes or voice to access things is already happening. Most smartphones have fingerprint readers allowing all sorts, from accessing the phone's content to buying things and paying bills.
So if I don't want to wait in line?
Consultants Deloitte predict the number of people using devices with fingerprint readers will hit the 1 billion mark this year.
And my order's ready to pick up in 10 minutes.
But at Finovate, one of Europe's largest financial technology events, there were plenty of companies questioning how safe the existing touch technology is, particularly for mobile banking.
In Apple's variation of this, actually only registers 20% of your fingerprint. So if I gave my mobile phone to everyone in this room, there's about 1,000 people, probably one of them would be able to unlock it.
It verifies your identity all from the palm of your hand.
Rather than using one fingerprint, Veridium offer a 4-fingerprint login, which they say increases the complexity of the data collected. And it's accessible, needing only a phone with a 5-megapixel camera to run. A decent phone camera can also be used for a facial recognition login. This software from iProve uses a series of colour flashes which reflect off the user's face, producing a pattern which is matched with the user's facial features. And iPrint ID has been designed specifically for mobile to allow users to log in using their eyes, but not the retina, because that requires a special camera which most phones don't have.
Using the camera already on the device, iVerify's patented method photographs and maps the visible veins and other microfeatures in and around the eye.
But where is all our biometric information being stored? Is it safer on the phone or at a remote server? With this software from iVerify, the data collected from the iPrint is stored temporarily on the phone.
iPrint ID uses a highly encrypted template. So what we do is we'll take some images of your eyes, but then we will extract feature points and we'll discard those images. So we're not keeping any images. And then what the data that we do extract is scrambled, we say chaffed, we have a bunch of fake points that are added, and then there's this very long encryption process that would take far too long to get into. It's also tied to the device. So once that template is encrypted, it's hashed using the device ID, so it's useless off of the device. It can never be used to reverse engineer back to the biometric data.
Then you take a selfie.
Other companies believe it's better to keep the data on a remote server so they can monitor attacks.
Mark's vectors are now deleted, as if they were never there.
A lot of biometric solutions happen on the device, and this is a very dangerous way to authenticate, because it means that people are able to take that biometric information, find a way to break it, and you may never know that they've broken it. However, because we're doing it in the server, we're able to see every attack, every attempt to get in. And that means that we can use our deep learning classifiers to be able to retrain our systems to adapt and know when those sorts of attacks happen.
However our biometric data is stored, what is paramount is that it's kept securely, because once it's gone for good. It's not like with a password. I can't phone up a helpline and have my fingerprint reset, and I certainly can't change my voice every 30 days. There have been reports of some facial recognition devices being fooled by photographs or masks, and even Play-Doh to collect fingerprints to unlock an iPhone. So whilst the technology being used is developing and often speeding up logins and transactions, it's still got plenty of room for improvement. Chloe Culpin reporting for Insight.
Well, to discuss that further, I'm joined now by Professor Jonathan Cave, who is the Senior Research Fellow specialising in information security at the University of Warwick here in the United Kingdom. Professor, good to talk to you about this. Now, of all our body parts, which we've seen we might be able to use, which do you think are the most secure?
I'd have to say that iris is most secure because it has a wealth of information. You don't need to use all of it to identify a person. It's epigenetic, in other words, it's different for each person. But unlike, let's say, DNA, it doesn't convey any further information about you.
But we have a challenge, don't we, that so far, retina scans are a very specialist technology. You need very accurate and very particular camera technology to make them work.
Yeah, retina is different from iris, though. The retina scan looks at the pattern of veins in the back of your eye, a bit like the ones they're using now for looking at veins in the palms of the hands. One of the sensitivities about it is that the pattern of veins can also convey information about whether, for example, you have high blood pressure or other physical conditions. And as you say, it's hard to get to, hard to see accurately. But the iris is on the front of the eye and can be seen relatively easy for most people in most wavelengths of light.
Does that mean that the simple, albeit I appreciate high quality cameras on our mobile phones, is that all you need to do a definitive iris scan?
Yes. Now, there are two things that are important here. I mean, there was a striking picture of a young Afghan woman that was taken many, many years ago, but the picture was of sufficient resolution to allow for her identification some decade or so later. So it doesn't change, and a good picture will pick it up. There is one concern, however, that with many forms of identification, they're used for authentication. In other words, you say who you are, and the technology is used to prove that that is in fact true. But with irises, you can take a picture from a distance away. People may not be aware that their iris is being photographed and analyzed, and their identity is being established through searching through computer files.
And what about contact lens technology? Can the system be fooled with that?
Yes, it can. And it can also be fooled. It doesn't work quite so well for brown eyes as it does for blue eyes, and it doesn't work equally well in all wavelengths of light. But the other forms that we have, passwords, as we know, defeat the simplicity of the human mind, and fingerprints can be compromised. Nothing will be perfect, but if you add more and more forms of identification, as in the new Payment Services Directive, PSD2, requires two-factor identification, then you can eliminate most of the errors and most of the opportunities for spoofing.
What about the human voice? One bank in the United Kingdom, I know, is using that over the telephone to authenticate access to a bank account. Is that a good enough, it's clearly a good enough technology for them. What do you think? Is it secure?
Well, remember that when the bank does it, the bank is concerned with limiting its own liability, not necessarily limiting the damage to you. All of us have voices that change over time. If you have a cold, if you haven't had a lot of sleep, If you've been yelling at your computer because it won't recognize your fingerprint, your voice may in fact be different. And the question is, how tolerant can the system be of differences in your voice without bleeding over into identifying other people as you? And of course, voices can be changed.
Well, I was going to ask you, and voices might change, I understand that with a cold or something, but what about a recorded voice? There's apocryphal tales now of a scam where people try and record people saying key words like yes or their full name in order to try and fool these systems.
Yeah, and it's not unlike what happens with fingerprint scans where you need a liveness test to indicate that it's a living, breathing human being in real time that you're interacting with. So you might need to have a variable set of queries that are put to a person so you know that there's a thinking mind behind it. But then you'd have to be able to match that to a template for that person.
What's your understanding of where all this identification data goes? Now, I imagine it goes into a small file, no doubt with scrambled and all sorts of hijinks done to it digitally, but nevertheless, there is a string of ones and zeros somewhere in the world that has got a version of my fingerprint, a version of my voice, a version of my iris flying around. Should I be concerned about that?
To a degree, you should be concerned. There are technical fixes. So, for example, if the data were encrypted, it's possible to send a query to those data saying, does this match, yes or no? And all you get back from that is a yes or a no. So it doesn't exactly identify you. That was the great virtue of passwords, which is that a password could belong to anyone. And so if the security of the system is high enough, then yes, it could be safe. On the other hand, if we then come to rely on them, that will attract risk, right? If you have these big central files. So there is an issue around, for example, fingerprint or iris scanners as to whether the processing is done locally where you are in a device that you possess or is done in some large central database. A large central database will be an attractive target.
Professor Jonathan Kay, thank you very much for your expertise.
Okay, thanks very much, Martin.
Now we end with our Insight Bite, a little something that we feel you should know. Now, this googly-eyed device may look strange, but it's actually a solar-powered system used to collect garbage from sea and rivers. Mr. Trash, as he's affectionately been dubbed, was put to the test 3 years ago at Baltimore Harbor in the United States. The device has since successfully cleared up over £1 million of rubbish. The currents in the water help power a wheel which lifts the rubbish onto a conveyor belt, which then empties them into a rubbish skip inside, and a boat then comes along and tows the skip away when it's full. Neat. That's all from me for now. I'm Martin Stanford. That was Insight.